Welcome into week number 2 of the Becoming Challenge. I'm so excited to have you here. What we're going to walk through today is all about our identity. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to share some scriptures. I'm going to give you some homework assignments to dive deep into who do you believe that you are? And to know that, we have to know who our God is. And then how does that shape what we think about our goals and our action steps? And we're going to look at those 6 pieces in being able to achieve those God possible goals and become who we need to be to achieve the vision that God has laid out for us. So this is going to be a great session, and stick around to the end for that homework assignment. I'm also going to be showing you my own homework assignment. I'm not just asking you to do this. This is something that I'm doing on a regular basis as well and sharing that with you. So let's dive in. Who does God say that I am? And who am I from the inside out? I love flamingos. Our website is the Flamingo Advantage. I did my TED talk on what flamingos taught me about purpose. We've got 2 books out there, Faith Like Flamingos and the Flamingo Advantage. And all of these flamingo metaphors, it's so important for us to look around and see God in his creation. But specifically when it comes to identity, flamingos are pink. And I think that's probably the first thing that comes to mind anytime anyone hears the word flamingos. And flamingos are pink all the way through. They can't just wake up and decide one day to not be pink for a while, or to go and put on their green feathers today so they can blend in with the greenery. Like they get their pinkness from what they feed themselves, and that becomes their identity, their authentic identity all the way through. Their flesh is pink, their blood is pink, everything about them is pink. And so that is what I want for you too. I want that authenticity for you to know from the inside out and be so totally, completely confident in who you are, that nothing can shake you, that nothing can force you to try to pretend to be something that you are not. And when you are that, then you can more easily step into what it is that God is calling you to do. What happened in the last quarter to make me who I am now? A lot of us feel like, especially for parents, feel like, oh, I wish they just stay little forever. A lot of us with grown children remember what they were like when they were small, and we try to fit them into our mind of who that person was, but that's not who they are today. Who they were at 7 is not who they are at 18, and that's definitely not who they're going to be at 40. We expect that people will change even as we don't want them to. We want to remember those more innocent times, and yet God created each of us to change. And so your identity is one that continues to change with you as you grow and become who God is making you into. To look at that more deeply, I'm going to challenge you this week to look into what happened in the last quarter to make you who you are now. You are very different than who you were 90 days ago. And I dare say by the end of this 90 days, you're going to be a completely different person again. Why? Because of what God is teaching you, because of the experiences that you have, because of the knowledge that you're able to learn, and the way that you're able to apply that, you become different. But your identity is primarily founded in the internal beliefs of who we are. So I'm going to challenge you to challenge those beliefs, to go back and dive into scripture this week and find out more about that identity. But I was talking with a client recently. I've got a client who runs an office full of people, and in looking over their last quarter, and in talking with each of the people individually, what went well and what can we do differently, almost across the board, there was this feeling of like, oh, there's so much we have to get better. They're completely skipping over the wins. And I was like, you know what? We need to slow down a minute, and we need to notice what went well. We need to, like, this person said that this was amazing. This is the best we've ever done this. This was the best we had more clients in this quarter than we've ever had. We did more work than we've ever done. Like, so many good things that they were just skipping right over and counting it as a terrible quarter. I was like, no, it wasn't. But it doesn't come to the surface. Our humanness wants to focus on the negative unless we intentionally stop and take time to focus on that positive. And so when we started to make a list of those wins, we could see that it was a really great quarter. It may be one of the best quarters they've ever had. And yet we were glazing over that to focus on the negative and what needed to be improved. I'm not saying that we don't need to improve on things. However, I am saying that when we stop and take a moment to evaluate and see what actually happened, there are a lot of times many more wins than we're remembering in the moment. And those wins help to shape who we are because now we're in a new place. Now we've had more clients than we've ever had before. We have to figure out how we're going to serve those clients. And what worked when we had this many clients may not work now that we have this many clients. You have to start thinking about the different processes and the different procedures that need to take place in order to handle that growth. You are different as a company now than you were in that at the beginning of that last quarter. You are different as a person now than you were at the beginning of that last quarter. And so, looking at what worked to make it happen, and then being able to take the 20% that was the most impactful and focus on that 20%. I mentioned in the last video about the 80-20 rule book and being able to narrow it down to the 20% that is doing the majority of the work or making the most progress and simplifying your systems and processes so that that 20% then becomes the 100%. That's how we level up and be able to focus on what is working. Your new future identity has bigger goals, forces you to think differently about how you're going to reach those new and bigger goals because you've never been there before. And why are people afraid of success and afraid of the future? Because we've never been there. We fear the things that we don't understand. And if I've never done this before, I don't feel like I understand it. If I've never been there before, I don't feel like I understand it. You know, we've been traveling extensively in the States with our family over the last 6 months. Huge blessing. So grateful to God for that opportunity. But in each new place, like, what's it going to be like, Mom? Kids will ask, what are we going to do when we get there? And I'm like, I don't know. We've never been there before. We have to research. We have to figure out because what we did here is probably not going to be the same kind of activities that are available in this new place. And that's a really simple example, but I hope you can see that when you up level, you are different. And a lot of times the things have to be done differently to continue to support that growth and to be able to move into the place that you're wanting to go. Now, we talked last time about, and I'm looking down because I've got my notes here. We talked last time about the 6 pieces of becoming. And those 6 pieces were vision, philosophy, identity, which we're talking about today, and then the goals and strategies and processes. And these are all tools that we use to become who we are becoming. Vision is a tool, it's a tool that guides us. Where are we going? How will I know when I get there? What does that look like? And how can I try to already be that person now? Make decisions from that place now. Philosophy is a tool. It's why we do what we do. It's the filter through which we evaluate our decisions and our plans and our strategies. Identity then becomes a tool. Who am I trying to be? You know, we hear a lot in our world today about the imposter syndrome. I did a whole training on that. Let me know if you want it. But the imposter syndrome is saying, like, oh, who am I? How dare I think that I could do this? Or maybe somebody else is superimposing that on you. How dare you think that you should do that or that you could be capable of this, whatever. But really, if you look at it, you're just practicing who you are becoming. We don't berate a little child for playing with a truck or for playing with a doll and pretending to take care of that or pretending to drive that truck. They're practicing who they are becoming. We look at that and think, oh, that's cute. She's going to make a great mom someday. He's going to be an awesome driver or mechanic someday. And we want to encourage that. And yet, when we become adults, it's like suddenly we think that, like, oh, that's a fake, or they're trying to pretend to be something they're not. Well, yeah, they're practicing who they are becoming. They're not that yet. You're not there yet, but you're practicing who you're becoming. You know, one of those things I think is important for us to be reminded and to remind ourselves and to remind each other of who we are becoming. Who do you want to be when you grow up? You know, and I'm saying that as a 40-something woman with adult children now. Who do I want to be when I grow up? Because God is still growing me into the person that I am becoming. There's still dreams in my heart that he's going to realize. There's still plans I want to make. There's still things I want to do and accomplish in my life. And those are things that I get to practice now so that I can become that person. And so the identity then becomes a tool to also help to guide us into what goals we need to make to be able to reach that. And then the strategies and the processes become the tools to reach the goals. And so we're going to keep refining how we operate to meet those goals. A big piece of your identity is perspective, is how you view who you are. And a lot of times that is how we view how we were brought up, how we view our past or different relationships that we've had. And so often we're tempted to operate out of that past. Just like we saw last week with Paul saying, I'm forgetting the things that are behind. I'm going to reach forward to the things that God has set before me and reach towards that prize. We're going to take that past and allow who we are today to frame how we see that past. And again, referring back to the 10x is easier than 2x book and Dr. Hardy's teaching, being able to look at something from a different perspective because of your current information, because of your current identity. And instead of saying that happened to me, to say that happened for me. And there's some scriptures here that I want to share around this idea. First off, I want to start with Romans 8:28. And here again, we're dealing with beliefs, and our identity stem from our beliefs. We do what we do, we say what we say, we think what we think, because we believe what we believe about God and his word and ourselves. That's a quote from Ken Collier. But everything that we do and say and think stems from those beliefs. And so the identity of who am I comes from what you're believing. And so let's go back to truth. Let's start with truth. If we're going to make any change, we've got to start with truth. Romans 8:28 says, we know that all things work together for good to them who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Now, his purpose was to come to earth and to give the gospel of the kingdom. And we're also called to give the gospel of the kingdom. We are also called to love our God. And so if we're doing that, we can know that all things are working together for our good. And that all things, I believe, includes the past. In God's time, of course, eternity has no timetable. Time is also a tool that was created for us to use here on earth for kingdom purposes. The things that were in the past are also working together for our good. We can take what we've learned from those things and be able to make better decisions, wiser decisions. We get to be different because of what God walked us through in our path, in our past. Then the other one that talks about our past is 2 Peter 1:3. And this one is actually written in past tense. All right. It says, according as his divine power, God's divine power, hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness through the knowledge of him that has called us, again, called us to glory and virtue. It says, hath given. That is a past tense. God has already given us by his power everything that we need for life and godliness. And so whatever was given to you in your past, whatever God walked you through, whatever God allowed you to learn, to experience, is so that you can have life and godliness. In some way, I believe that God can either redeem it or that it was meant for good in your life, if you choose to see it from that perspective. And not to dwell there, but then to move into, all right, then who am I now and where am I going? Leaving behind the things that were past, learning from them, using them as stepping stones. Here's where I am now. Here's where I'm going. And GPS doesn't ask where you've been. It says, where are you now and where do you want to go? And from that, we make a plan. Then looking into scripture, we also see in 2 Corinthians 9:8, talking about our present, God is able to make all grace abound toward you. Grace having two definitions, divine enablement and unmerited favor. God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always, having sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. That you may be able to have what you need to do every good work. This is amazing to think that I am someone who God has already provided everything I need, a sufficiency in all things, so that I can do the good work that he has called me to. And then we see in Matthew 19:26, Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. He spoke in the present tense. With men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. That's why I call these God possible goals, because we think in our humanness that it's impossible. And you know what? In our own strength, it is. But with God, all things are possible. And if I stake my identity in that, I am a person who believes that when God said it, it is truth. And God said this in present tense for all of us to be able to claim all things are possible. Then 1 Thessalonians 5:24, faithful is he, again, present tense, faithful is he that calleth you, who also will do it. This is talking about your present and your future. God is faithful right now in this moment when you're having to make decisions and take actions towards that goal and that vision that he's put in your heart. And he will do it. in the future. Every moment we're in the present, and the next moment we're in the future, which becomes the present, looking forward to the future. And it's a cycle of things, but I can believe and I can walk with my God who is faithful right now in the present, who has called me to this vision that he's given me. And I can believe that he will do it through me. I don't have to do it. He will do it. Faithful is he that called you, who also will do it. I just have to be willing for him to do it through me. Then there's a whole lot I could say about being called. If you go to BibleGateway.com, that's one of my favorite resources for Bible study online. But BibleGateway.com, and then you look up just the words called us. If you do a search for those words, called us, and look at the New Testament, see all the different things that God has called us to, it's quite amazing. The things that we should be striving for, the things that we should be working towards. There's multiple different things, but see if you can find just 5 scriptures that say what you are called to, what you should be aiming for, what those prizes are that we're to be working for, leaving behind the things that are past, pressing forward for the things that are before us. Who do I need to be so that this identity becomes true? What do I need to believe so that this identity becomes true? What do I need to be working for to be the person who can fulfill the vision that God has given me? How do I become the person that these things are evidenced in my life? That's where we want to go with this identity thing. I want you to think about, how are you different now than you were 12 months ago? How are you different now than you were 3 months ago, 90 days ago? You are a different person, just like I said before, and you will be a different person 90 days from now. But do you ever stop and think about how you're different? Do you ever evaluate your own growth? We evaluate growth in our stocks, and we evaluate growth in our kids and our animals and our plants, but we don't ever stop and evaluate our own growth. How are you different now than you were 90 days ago? Evaluation helps us see the progress, and it helps us to progress and continue to have the motivation to move forward. We can be just like that client of mine and think, oh man, that was a terrible quarter. And yet, when we stop to evaluate and see what happened, where were the wins, where were the learnings, how am I different, we can see that there was a ton of progress, and the motivation returns to continue to progress towards the goals that God has set before us. Now, last year at this time, I was focused on a TED Talk. That was my big goal for last year. It didn't happen in that year, but it did happen in the following 6 months. And it was a whole 377-day process to do that TED Talk. And from the time we started putting money and time towards it to the time that it was actually released, 377 days, 53 applications to different TED platforms. You should go watch it. What Flamingos Taught Me About Purpose. If you just look up TEDx and Flamingos, you'll find it. But that was what I was working on last year. That's who I was. This year, I'm someone who has given a TEDx, someone who has had that experience, someone who's able to leverage that in our marketing for our business, someone who's able to use that as messaging to tell folks how you can be confident in the purpose that God gave you. This is who I am today. The TEDx is no longer a priority. So evaluating how we're different also helps us evaluate those priorities that continue to grow and change as we grow and change. Then looking at the goals for the quarter. I don't know if you all have looked at your goals like since last week when we wrote them down. I asked you to write down the 3 goals and submit those, but those goals may have changed. Sometimes we get new information as we become who God is becoming us. And that new information demands that we change the route that we're going, or change a strategy, or try a different action step. That's okay. You get to continually shift that as God continues to grow you. We want to continually be restating those goals, rewriting those goals, redirecting those goals and resources as necessary, because it's like this living thing that gets to change with us. Each week in this challenge is going to look a little bit different. Each week, you are 1 week different than you were last week, 1 week older, 1 week wiser, 1 week more experienced, 1 week of more time with your God, 1 week of more opportunities. And you should be taking in what has happened to you, taking in that difference. How am I different? How is my business different? How are my relationships different? What does that mean? Does it affect the goals? Do I have new information that affects the goals that we're working towards? And then looking at, are the goals still in line with who I know God is calling me to become? And, Dr. Ben Hardy, I refer to him a lot because I just came out of that 90-day intensive coaching with him. But one of the things that that he reiterates all the time is this idea of future self. And in 10x is easier than 2x, he mentions that as well. Who is your future self? Have you ever thought about it? Have you ever thought about what that person will be like, what they will do, what they won't do? I did another exercise a couple of years ago where I wrote out 10 years from now, this is what a day will be like. And the entire day, step by step by step, moment by moment, what happens and where I am and who I'm with and what I'm doing and what I'm enjoying and what kind of impact that we've had and what kind of growth, what kind of memories are we making, and being super, super detailed so that I could visualize it and picture it. You know what? Some of those things are things that God has put in your heart so that he can awaken them and give you what you need to be able to achieve them. It's okay for you to dream those God-sized dreams, those God possible dreams, and go after them. But think about your future self. Maybe it's 3 years from now. Maybe it's just 90 days from now. Maybe it's 10 years from now. But who is that person that you are becoming, that you desire to be? My future self is not addicted to caffeine or coffee. My future self is someone who enjoys walking, who enjoys gardening, someone who speaks on stage to thousands of people, someone who is known as one of the most impactful voices on this decade of Christians in the secular marketplace. This is super important to get clarity on, or to allow yourself to have clarity of these dreams of who God is making you into. And this is going to be part of your homework. We're going to ask you to fill out, just like I did here on your identity, what major progress did you make in the last quarter? One of the things that I am working towards is walking a certain number of miles in a year. And so I'm documenting that progress each quarter. How much have I walked toward the goal? How much do I have left? We wanted to be able to take more family time. There were certain family goals that we had. We were able to meet some financial goals and to get some things set for our family. I read 6 books. That was one of my goals. Like, what progress did you make in the last quarter? Sit down and evaluate that. Personal and business. In our business, we were able to grow our membership. We completed that TED Talk that I mentioned earlier. We made one of the biggest investments in our business to date. All these different things, those were big progress goals for us that we were able to meet and exceed in the last quarter. It's part of what changed us into who we are now, learning from that experience and be able to go. And then how are you different than you were in the last 90 days? Now, you may want to do this on a different page than you did your summary on. You may want to just continue that document, however you choose to do it, so that you can submit it and enter to win prizes there. But how are you different than you were 90 days ago? Just stop and think about, who are you then? Maybe even like make a chart 90 days ago to now. What was different in your life? What is different in your life now? How have you grown? How are you different? How is your mindset different? How are your relationships different? And being able to stop and think about that. One of the ways that we're different is that we made some big changes in our team over the last 90 days. And that allowed me the time freedom to be able to work when I needed to work, and as much as I needed to be able to continue to grow the membership, even as we were traveling with the family and making great memories with them. Really stepping into that living and giving as God directs, and living with no regrets. That's my prayer for you. I want you to be able to learn to live with no regrets. So who are you growing into? Who is the future you? And what does that look like? How will you know when you get there? And then what are your 3 God possible goals for this quarter? I want you to state those again. I know we asked for those last week. We're going to ask for them again. What are your 3 God possible goals for this quarter? And it's okay if they change. In fact, I expect them to change at some point throughout this challenge. And then if you want to, just let us know how you're enjoying this. I would love to hear from you as you submit those, if you're willing to, and look forward to seeing you again in the next video.